4 more IDF soldiers were killed in battle in northern Gaza over Shabbat. And that is in addition to other recent IDF deaths and injuries in northern Gaza as well. As the article states, 4 Israel Defense Force soldiers were killed in the Gaza Strip on Saturday, the military announced. 6 additional troops were wounded in the same incident, 2 of them seriously. According to an initial IDF probe, the soldiers were struck by an explosive in northern Gaza's Beit Hanun. Separately, 8 soldiers were wounded on Friday in an explosion during operations in Jabalia, also the northern Gaza Strip. 3 sustained serious injuries but are now stable. Northern Gaza is just minutes away from Israeli communities. No Israelis near the northern Gaza border want to see any Gazans living anywhere near them ever again, and to have to feel threatened of another October 7th invasion and massacre. And this isn't just for northern Gaza, this is for all of Gaza. It is insane that IDF soldiers are still being killed by Hamas terrorists in northern Gaza or anywhere in Gaza. The war has been going on in Gaza for 15 months. There is no reason that Hamas terrorists are still able to harm and kill our soldiers. To put things into perspective, Syrian militants took days to overthrow the Assad regime and take over all of Syria. So what is going on? Why are our Holy IDF soldiers still getting killed in Gaza 15 months later, despite the unbelievable heroic work of our Holy IDF soldiers? Well, I have been explaining to you since the beginning of this war that, number one, we have been unable to defeat Hamas because the Biden administration has been forcing us to give aid to Hamas throughout the whole war. And 2, we have a neutered senior IDF intelligence command that has been pushing back against Netanyahu and his government from day one, always saying no to almost every single major military offensive that the government wanted to do in order to defeat Hamas. So basically, we have been experiencing our IDF senior staff more interested in following orders from the Biden administration than orders from our own Israeli government. And still, where we are today is unbelievable. To understand the failure of the battle in Gaza on a strategic level, listen to this from United States Joint Chief of Staff Charles Brown explaining exactly why.
Experience. Not only do you have to actually go in and clear out whatever adversary you're up against, you have to go in and hold the territory, then you got to stabilize it. The Israelis did not actually, once they cleared it, didn't hold, and so that allows your adversary then to repopulate in areas if you're not there. And so that does make it more challenging for them as far as being able to meet their objective of being able to militarily destroy and defeat Hamas.
Israeli journalist Hillel Biton-Rosen recently reported exactly that in saying that IDF Chief of Staff Halevi and IDF Southern Command head Finkelman invented a military combat method that does not exist: ongoing raids instead of taking over the territory. They send IDF units that know how to fight and maneuver, open massive fire from the ground, clear an area to destroy the enemy, and then have them leave. To have them return in the future to do that same thing all again. The result? Almost 200 IDF soldiers killed in the north of the Gaza Strip, in addition to the rebuilding of the Hamas terrorist battalions. Why? Because they always tell our forces to pull out, which then allows them to remain and rebuild. Hillel Biton-Rosen also reported the story of one IDF Major General who told his soldiers on Hanukkah, and I quote, "Last year I lit Hanukkah candles with my soldiers in Beit Hanun in Gaza. We walked around there with complete self-confidence. A year later, and the situation is only getting worse." End quote. Why did that IDF commander say that? Because the strategy of ongoing raids, instead of conquering an area, remaining there, and pushing the enemy out for good, has not been done. Another Israeli reporter named Yossi Yehoshua recently reported that many high command officers in the IDF have warned the Chief of Staff and the commander of the Southern Command against the method of ongoing raids in the Gaza Strip instead of remaining in the areas, including Brigadier General Chico Tamir, who tried in every way to influence, but they were all rebuffed. And the disastrous tactic of ongoing raids instead of remaining in the area and pushing the enemy out continues. To this day, both the IDF Chief of Staff and Head of Southern Command, Finkelman, are still in their positions. Their remaining in their jobs is the best testament to the absolute failure of our senior IDF staff in successfully fighting this war, 15 months in. Which is why Israeli Defense Minister Yisrael Katz has recently instructed the IDF to prepare a plan to defeat Hamas if hostages remain in Gaza by January 20th. It's insane that 15 months into this war, that only now is the army being forced to develop a strategy to defeat Hamas. Why? Because under the failed Biden-Blinken administration that is finally leaving, our government can finally force the hands of our senior IDF staff with an incoming Trump administration that will hopefully support us in doing everything we have to do to win and provide total victory. As an IDF soldier myself who has served in this war, with two sons who both served in Gaza and in Lebanon, and one who also served in Syria, it literally makes me cry when talking about this, because this is the most just war we have ever fought, with a clear way to victory. We know what we have to do, yet we have been stopped from being able to do just that and provide security for all of Israel. But let's talk about the strategy, or the lack thereof, that's holding Israel back from achieving the decisive victory in Gaza. The reality is that Israel and the Jewish people in Israel, we are ready to win this war totally. But the Biden administration's policies, together with the IDF Chief of Staff's compliance with those misguided strategies from the U.S. Biden administration, have left us restrained and unable to act as we must to win this war 15 months in. Prime Minister Netanyahu's government has laid out plans to defeat Hamas completely, take over the control of the distribution of humanitarian aid to ensure Hamas is no longer in control, and ensure that Gaza is no longer a launching pad for terror. But time and again, Biden's White House and Blinken's State Department have pushed back, urging restraint instead of decisive action, and tragically, our IDF Chief of Staff, with his senior command, have followed their lead, and our soldiers are paying the price with their lives, and we are still fighting this war that should have been ended months ago. Take the situation in Beit Hanun in Gaza, a story that highlights the absurdity of Israel's self-imposed limitations in the name of morality. The IDF has entered and conquered the neighborhood of Beit Hanun multiple times. Brave Israeli soldiers have lost their lives in repeated operations there that were not necessary to be repeated. Yet Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi insists on avoiding full control of the area and instead ongoing raids, leading to needless risk to our soldiers' lives. And let's be clear, Israel has urged civilians to evacuate Beit Hanun, and Hamas terrorists remain there using non-combatants as human shields. Here's just some of the latest footage of IDF soldiers fighting house to house in Beit Hanun again. Yet Israel continues to provide food and water to this area while engaging in combat, all because we're being forced by the Biden administration. This isn't just a military failure. This is a moral failure. And this has been forced upon us from day one in this war from the Biden administration. What justification is there for supplying those who support our enemy? Why provide aid to people who could save their own lives by walking a few minutes to safety, but instead choose not to because they choose to risk their lives to protect Hamas terrorists? No other military leader in history would sacrifice his troops' lives rather than cut off the enemy's resources and force them to surrender. All we have to do, clear the area. Push all the Hamas terrorists and non-combatants out of the area, never to remain. And we remain in the area, pushing them south, never to be able to return north again. That is basic warfare 101 that even U.S. Chief of Staff Charles Brown spoke about in the video I showed earlier. The IDF Chief of Staff has stopped our military from fighting this way, and stopped us from holding areas we conquered. Why? Because he is more afraid of the world calling us occupiers. There's nothing wrong with occupying land that is being used as terror launching pad by Islamo-Nazi enemies. And then there's Egypt. Under international law, Egypt is obligated to open its border with Gaza to allow civilians to flee, yet it refuses. If we're serious about a lasting solution, we must pressure Egypt to uphold its responsibility and open up its border with Gaza. Hundreds of thousands of Gazans will leave, maybe millions if there are that many really there. Freeing Gaza of terror supporters and terrorists and allowing Israel to resettle the land with Jewish settlements, ensuring it never becomes a terror threat by our Islamo-Nazi enemies ever again. The Biden administration has done nothing about that, even though it is the most moral solution for allowing non-combatants to escape a war zone. And Israel hasn't been able to raise the issue either. I've raised it when I've been speaking in Washington, D.C., but official Israel hasn't. Hopefully, with the incoming Trump administration, we will finally hear this talked about. All President Trump has to do is threaten to withhold financial aid from Egypt unless they abide by international law and open up the border with Gaza. It's that simple. Now let's talk about leadership. When will the IDF Chief of Staff recognize that we are fighting for our survival, not for the approval of the international community? A policy of restraint, of appeasement, is not a strategy to protect Israelis, and it's not a strategy for victory. And it's time that we bring change. It's time that we get rid of our IDF Chief of Staff and his senior staff that have been leading together with him. Unfortunately, the political left in the country would destroy the country with protests if he was fired. So we are left to wait for the day that his position officially ends so that he can finally be replaced. Now, that day is coming soon, even though not soon enough. But again, the challenge will be in choosing a new IDF Chief of Staff who has not been neutered by the existing U.S. foreign policy stranglehold on senior IDF intelligence staffers. We need someone experienced enough, yet young enough, and not yet neutered by that existing system. And here's the good news. January 20th. Hopefully, with the return of strong leadership in the White House, the Netanyahu government will finally have the backing to do what we need to do to defeat Hamas and all of our Islamo-Nazis totally. But again, I'm not putting my hope in Trump. I'm putting my hope in ourselves. It's up to us. Hopefully, we will finally experience a military strategy that prioritizes Israel's victory over Hamas without interference from misguided U.S. policies that will allow us to finally defeat our Islamo-Nazi terror enemies and secure the people of Israel and make this place the beautiful, unbelievable place it's supposed to be for us. This war isn't about Gaza. It's about the future of Israel and the Jewish people. And as the people of Israel wake up to these truths, we will demand nothing less than total victory. And that total victory must include the exodus of Gazans and a resettling of Gaza by Jews making Gaza Jewish again. And here is what former Israeli leftist Irit Linor has to say about doing what we must do.
העניין של הסבל של העזתים בעיניי הוא שאלה משנית. אגב, לי לא אכפת אם הם סובלים או לא סובלים. אכפת לי שני דברים. אכפת לי שהם לא יהוו יותר איום עלינו. אכפת לי שאחרים לא יחשבו שזה משהו שאפשר לעשות לנו. ואכפת לי כמובן שהחטופים יחזרו, והם צריכים לחזור בדרך כזאת, שאף אחד לא יעלה בדעתו שהדרך להכריע את ישראל במערכה היא לחטוף אזרחים ישראלים. אבל, תודה, העניין הכיבוש זאת מילה שעדיין צריכה לעבור נורמליזציה בשיח, בגלל שאיכשהו הם הצליחו. החבר'ה שלך, משה?
ושלך?
לא, שלי. אתה יודע, אנחנו צריכים בשביל לא לרדת מרמת הגולן, היה צריך להמציא את הסיסמה העם עם הגולן, חס וחלילה לא דיברו על החלת ריבונות או משהו כזה. אתם לימדתם אותנו שכיבוש זה דבר רע, ואנחנו נלמד אתכם שכיבוש זה הדרך היחידה לשרוד.
Bottom line. We can't be afraid of what people think anymore. We must do what the right thing is and the moral thing is. And we have to ensure that the sacrifices of our soldiers have not been in vain. Victory is not a dirty word, and no Jew should be scared about resettling our ancestral lands that we liberate from our Islamo-Nazi enemies. It's time for truth to overcome the fear of political correctness. And what will people think? The proud King David-like Jews of today are not afraid to do what we need to do to provide safety for the Jewish people and the whole freedom-loving world by doing the right thing. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing and helping me spread the truth. If you are not yet a daily subscriber to our belief-based, inspiring, politically incorrect truth about Israel, the Jewish people, and the freedom-loving world, what are you waiting for? Go to pulseofisrael.com and click to subscribe. And yes, we are a donor-based organization. We need your donations in order to do our work. Every once in a while, click on the donate button on pulseofisrael.com. Shalom, everyone, and thanks for watching.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.